All right. Welcome to this video on methods. This video is done because one of our learners, two of our learners requested it. So I'm going to be explaining methods using the video, and I hope you pay attention because that's important. All right. Um, Over on the right hand side, as you can see over here, we have an algorithm segment, which we are basically going to use to try and create a method. So this is coming out of our topic task one. I didn't have any other examples to use, so I'm just going to be using this. So let's look at it in detail. So looking at the algorithm here, we need to identify which parts can we make a method. So you have to look at it specifically and say, okay, this we need to make a method, or we'll see what we have. So normally method has to do with some type of process or calculation, and within this algorithm here, you need to see that, okay, where is the calculations happening, or where is the process really taking place. So we can see that over here with the sum and the nums getting values, that's like a process. So our method should be revolving around this part of our algorithm, right? So let's uh, see how we will make use of this in the method as well, okay? So we have two parts, the sum gets sum plus num, and the num gets num plus 2, and uh, we also have a while statement in there as well. So either we have to put the only sum and num in the method, or we can also include the while in the method. But we will see how that will work out as well. Um, yeah, okay. So we can further look at this and say, okay, method always sometimes wants us to also give something out. And if it wants to give us something out, then we might have to include the output. But let's first look at the method. A method has basically two parts, right? This part is a method, right? So the first one is a method uh, signature. This is the first part of the signature. So the method signature basically tells you that the method should basically look like this. If you write the method, it should look like this. Um, Different programming languages uses different method signatures, but for Python, we start with the def, and after def, we have the method name. Method name is very important, and then we have our open brackets, and in the open brackets, this is where we put our variables, right? So variables can be different. It can be one variable, it can be x, it can be a, it can be d, it can be three variables. It does not need to be anything specific. This is just telling the method that, oh, we're going to make use of three things, okay, inside the method. So if those three things are not available, the method won't work, right? No matter what you do. If you say the method will take in three things and you only give it two, it will give you an error, okay? And so let's say we call this just variables. So a method signature has a def, method name, and variables, which is in brackets. And then obviously we end up with a semicolon at the end, all right? So variables can be one or more. Just remember, if it's more, we separate them by commas. In Phony, commas is basically the way we use to separate a lot of things. Okay, so let me just add a colon over there. And then after you add the method and you go inside the method, we basically have statements that the method should do, or our calculations. All right. So calculations or statements, this is basically what the method should do. And after we do our calculations and methods, we normally want to get the result, all right? And that is where print comes in. So we either have a print statement in the method, and we can actually just print our statement or our calculations directly as well. We don't need to add a second layer. Sometimes it's easy just to print instead of having two different layers of code, right? So just remember that this line spacing tells us that we are inside the method, and if we want to get out of the method, we just create a backspace, right? So we go back to the leftmost edge of the line, all right? And that's what we have. So remember what I said, that sometimes it's just straightforward to print our calculations rather than to calculate it and then print it. That's just wasting code or wasting lines. So we can actually just comment that out. And yeah, so once we've commented out, basically that's how the method signature looks like, and it's done. So after the method signature, we have what we call the method call. So a method call is basically just telling us that we want to make use of that method, right? The method that we have created, how do we make use of it? We basically call it. So it's just a nice way of saying, uh, hey, can you use that method to do something for me? Oh, you did something like this before. Oh, your method contains this statement. What can I do to get information out of that method? So we call it a call. So we are calling that method, right? So when we call a method, we have a method name. We start with the method name. This is a unique way. And then we have our brackets, and in the brackets, we put in our variables, right? So our variables, these variables can be also an X, can be any variable like we have. So this time it's just an X. It's still a variable. It doesn't matter what it is now, but sometimes the X will be an actual number or values that we get from the users or variables that we have already defined somewhere in the code. Okay. So once we basically call that method with the method name, then that's it. That's basically it. That's all the method has to do, the signature and the call. So in the exams, when we ask you a method call, a method signature, this is basically what we want to see. All right. So we can play around with whatever we put in the method, and how we call it should be depending on what the method wants us to put in as variables. But that's basically it. So let's see now how we're going to change this to suit our algorithm that we have on the right hand side. Okay, so I'm not going to change a lot of things. I will just be using or editing out certain things, right? So with our algorithm here, let's quickly see how we can decide. So we know we need to do some calculations. That is, our sum gets sum plus num, and num gets num plus 2. That is the thing. And we also said that since we have a print statement in our method, the output sum could also be part of our method. So I can actually include sum also in the method, output sum in the method. So noting that, we can basically, let me just change the color quickly. We can basically include this whole part of our algorithm. This whole part, we can basically make that a method, all right? So with the output, at the end, it will output sum, right? So we will make that whole part a method. All right. So I might have to switch between two windows because I'm currently only using one screen. So just wait. All right. So let's get started. Um, in fact, I'm going to comment out some of these things because we don't need them now. It's not part of the method. So here we have the method, the def method name. Okay, that's fine. And going back to our algorithm, um, okay, what do we have? We have variables. There's a sum and there's a num, and we can make use of those ones, right? So sum and num. So the method output is basically telling us it wants the sum. So we can change the method name to sum because the output says it wants a sum, all right? And the variables that it wants, it's going to make use of sum and a num. Okay, but before we put in the variables, we need to initialize them because that's what the algorithm wants. So we will say sum equals to 0, 0, and then we will say num equals to 2, or num gets 2, according to our algorithm, num gets 2. And okay, sum is having a red, so it means it's predefined in phony, so I need to change the name of sum. I can either make it a capital letter, but I don't like capital letter because our variable is already called sum, so and the small letter is predefined, so I cannot use predefined words, so I have to change it. So let me just make it some, what can I use? Some X maybe, yeah, I think we can make use of sum x, and let's also just change to it num to x. All right. So it's still the same as the algorithm. I just put an x at sum just to make the name longer so that it can be used by cloning instead of that red one where it will give us a problem at the end. Okay. So that's the only thing I changed. It's still the same, right? So now we have done our initializations, the first two lines, and now we need to do the while. So since the while is like a what do we call it, a process or statement or calculations, we can put that basically into our method, and we can now also say what are the variables that our method will use. So our method wants to make use of sum and it wants to make use of num. So we can put in sum there, and we can also put in num. So these are the two variables that our method wants. Okay, if it's not there, it won't work. All right. So for now, we will leave it as sum and num x. Okay, sum x and num x. If I call it sum at some point, just remember it's sum x. If I call it num, just remember it's num x. Okay. All right. So after the semicolon, now we need to basically put in what's supposed to come into the method. So within our code here, what's first is while num is less than 10. Okay, so that's what the algorithm is saying. So I can type that in first. While num x, because we are using x now, is less than 10. Okay, so now num is less than 10, that's correct. Do, so that's our semicolon. And what should we do? So we should basically uh, do the sum calculations, right? So it would be sum x equals to, or gets sum x plus num x. So excuse me, small letters, num x, and that's the first line done. And then the second line will be num x it gets equals to, that would be num x plus 2. All right. So I'm just leaving spaces to make it look neat. All right. And then we have end the while. So this, we said we don't usually write it in Python code, but in others you might have to, for example, Visual Basic. So we just end the while, and remember to end the while, you just make a backspace from that indentation that the while is using, right? And then remember our last statement was print the statement. So what do we want to output? So we can delete that. So we basically just want to output the sum x, okay? So sum x is what we use. That's it. And then our method is done. All right. Now, you know where we get all of these variables from. You can see we took it exactly as it is in our algorithm, and it doesn't basically matter what we do. All right. So after your okay, I forgot to put in. I deleted the num x. Let's delete it from our initialization. So I just need to put it back quickly, otherwise we'll get an error. Okay, equals to 2. That's fine. So now method call. So how do we call our method, right? So we have two variables. One is sum, one is num. Uh, and sum is the first one. So we can also change that to an A and to a B. So because we can use any variable, it doesn't matter what you use, because sum x is already defined and we can just call it in a method A and B, right? But over in the method call, we will use sum x and we will use num x. But for the method, it can be any variable, however we define it, doesn't matter, it will still work the same. So let's just change all the sums and nums. Num x is B, sum is A, sum is A, num x is B, num x is B, num x is B, and then sum is A. So by changing the variables of the method, it doesn't change what the method does. It's still the same as our algorithm. All I did was change the variable names. All right. So A is still going to be what we put in the call. All right. If we call sum, if we put the first value in the call as sum x, then a will be replaced by sum x at all the points. Okay. Sometimes you also like to put brackets on the whiles. It doesn't really matter. It still does the same thing. All right, so that's how we change the method. Now let's go into the method call. So the method call must be the method name. So what's the method name? The method name is sum. So over here, I need to type in sum, and then I need to uh, put in the variables. So the variables a, b does not exist, but we have a variable called sum x, which is the first one. So I'll put sum x in first, separated by a comma, and then I will put in num x second. That's our second variable. So these are the two variables that is required from the method, right, in order to work. So let's just comment that one out so that the method call is not seen as line of code. And basically that's it. So everything is fine. We have our method signature, which is that one. Let's just put it down there. And yeah, spaces. And this is just our initialized variables. So let's just say initialize variables. Yeah, so that is basically it. So we have our method signature and we have our method calls, right? So we're gonna save that. When we run, it's gonna ask us to save first. So remember, you have to save it first. You won't see the pop-up window, but I just need to type in what we're saving it. We're going to save it as method example 2.2. I think that should be correct. Method example 2.2, and I'm just gonna save it. So method example 2.2, that's what we did. You can see at the bottom it ran successfully and it gave me an output of 20, right? So that's coming from the method, right? If you want to check your answers, if it's correct or what really happened, why did they give the answer 20, we can basically run a debug. So you know debug is right there on top. So when we run a debug, it will go through each step line by line. So first we do the initialization, then it sees, oh, you have a method, okay, fine. And then it says, oh, you have a method call. All right, now it goes to the method call and it sees now sum is 0, num x is 2. So it takes those two values and tries to put them into the method. This is how it's going to call it now. So it has two values from the initialization. Sometimes those values are from user input. So you just need to remember, if you say get it from user input, then you have to write the code that gets it from user input. Okay. So now we have the two variables that has been defined and put into the method call. And let's step through a bit. Okay, I'm just trying to step through it, but it seems like you are not able to see all the steps. But if you do it, you will be able to see all the steps yourself as well. And basically, that's what it is. So it will check every line and everything, and then it will add, and it will repeat the method, repeat the call over and over again uh, until it comes to the final line 15 where it's supposed to print. So when it comes to the line 15 where it's supposed to print, that's the output that it will give, and then it gives us an output of 20, which is here at the bottom. Okay, so running a debug, I'm sorry that you couldn't see that now, but I believe that that's what we wanted to show. You can do it on your own and then see how the method also works. It's exactly the same as our um, algorithm, okay, how the algorithm was. And remember, we just changed the variables inside the method, but it means exactly the same thing, right? We had started with num and sum, and then we just changed it to a and b, but it still produced the same answer. But in the call, we put in the actual values of num and sum, all right? So the two parts, the method signature, if we ask you in a test exam method signature, we want to see something like that. If we ask you a method call, we want to see the one at the bottom, right? So method call, we want to see just that is how you call a method, and we don't ask too many things. So methods don't also need to be too complicated inside. Just keep it simple according to what you're asked to do. All right. And I think that is it. So why is methods important? It is important because for your project, you will have to use some methods, okay? And whenever you get stuck, you could actually use the assistant because Phony has an assistant that it uses, and I want you to make use of that assistant as much as you possibly can, all right? Um, Remember our indentations, the spaces here. If you have errors, you can use the assistant to help you with the errors and things like that. So you have to work together. You just have to do this simple codes together. And apart from that, there's not much I can tell you other than that. And try it out. I think you have a lot of algorithm segments from our Google Classroom that you can try and change them into method just to see if they will give you the same answer because I believe you worked through these things already. All right. Um, yeah, there's not much other than that. And as you can see, it's a very short video on it, and it's basically what we tried to explain in the class as well. So you would have noticed that apart from method call and method signature, that I did not do use the assistant here, but in the class, normally I would try to leave one mistake in the code and have you find out where is the mistake in the code. For example, I could have put in ABC instead, and then in your call you don't have